My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Welcome back to MagisTalk, where we ask the question, where is God calling me today? I'm your host, Ian Peoples, and I'm joined by my friend and Jesuit brother, Dan Finucane, and we're sitting down with Father Andres Vall-Serra, who, for our 6th installment of our Meet the Jesuits series. And you may have seen Father Andres around town, either at St. Martin de Porres or running laps around everyone and everything here. He's an avid runner. We'll talk about that.
And just to introduce Father Andres a little bit, he was born in Bogota, Colombia, but was raised in Wichita, Kansas. And prior to entering the Society of Jesus, served in the U.S. Navy for 3 years. Is that correct? As a Jesuit, Father Andres has spent time throughout Central America and the Caribbean, including Honduras, Nicaragua, and Puerto Rico. And he did his first year as a priest down in Punta Gorda back in 2016 at St. Peter Claver Parish, and arrived here back again to Belize this past August to become pastor of St. Martin de Porres Parish here in Belize City. And as Ian mentioned, Father Andres is a runner, so if you're up early enough, say what, like 4:35 a.m.?
Let's go.
He's there. He's
Time to
waiting.
roll.
Princess Margaret, from Martin's to Princess Margaret and back again. What's your typical miles? What are you putting in the morning?
No, usually during the week I'll put in maybe 5.5 miles.
Oh, just
And then on the
5.5
weekends...
every day? No, that's great. Well, it's good to have you with us, Father Andres.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be airing during the summer. I think you'll be around during that time. So again, yeah, about 5 a.m. you'll see him on the streets. But to jump into our questions, Father Andres, we know that we know, because we know you, that you're from Bogota, Colombia.
Right.
I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly. You have that Colombian flair to you. But your family moved to Wichita, Kansas when you were a kid.
Right.
First off, do you remember anything from Bogota?
Very few things, right? Mm-hmm. So I moved to the States when I was very young, so 4 years old when I arrived to the States. First to Houston and then to Wichita. And so I didn't return back to Colombia until 2011. So
what was that like? What was it like coming back? Did you remember? Did you recognize any places?
Well, I went to visit some family, aunts and uncles, and my grandmother's old house. And then being in the garden there were some kind of recollections of certain things, which was beautiful. And it was very nice to finally return, especially as a Jesuit. So
that's wonderful. What was your life like growing up in Kansas? And I think more importantly, what we like to ask is, what was the role of your faith growing up? What was your faith life like? Sure,
Great question, right? I went to Catholic schools from 7th grade through high school, and we had some incredible priests that were there both in my grade school and high school. These were men that were just so happy, and you could tell that they loved what they did. And so to see that for me was exciting. And to know that they were available and they didn't in any way distance themselves, they were just present to each one of us. And I think that was something that captured my attention and imagination of maybe looking at a possibility, so of a vocation. So,
And was that a time where you started thinking about a vocation of the priesthood? When would you say that call or that inkling came to you?
Sure. When I was, in 7th grade, I remember being an altar boy, and a guest priest was coming in, and after we had finished celebrating the Mass, he came to me and said, "Have you ever thought of being a priest?" And I ran out of that room as quickly as possible. So definitely the question was there, but I clearly was not listening for a while. So,
Well, and you say you were an altar boy, but we found out recently that it's not like that was just pure altruism, that you were just wanting to serve the church. I guess in the Diocese of Wichita, they paid their altar boys big bucks. Like 20 for a wedding and 40 for a funeral, I hear.
This is true. Yes.
So I think if we want more altar servers in Belize,
we're gonna have to start paying, right? But wait a minute. Yeah, that'd be a challenge right now. That'd be a challenge.
Did that come with a 401k or what was the retirement package?
That's right. That's right.
Well, your uncle was a Jesuit, and I think he would come and visit periodically. Was it annually?
Right.
So what was it like, kind of being around him? What role did he have in thinking about the priesthood, thinking about the Society of Jesus?
Sure. No, so he a Jesuit in the Colombian province. My father's brother, much older than my father, but he would come to visit us maybe once every 2 years or so, and he would spend time with us. We would go out camping. He loved to be outdoors, and he was a person that, again, was such an approachable person, happy, enjoyed his life. And I remember just being little, but he would always find time, and we would have a serious conversation. And it was great to recognize somebody that was older and was listening, paying attention. And I think that was, again, one of those moments when I was like, wow, this is just this great guy.
After you finished high school, at this Catholic high school you talked about, you actually enlisted in the Navy.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about maybe what your desires were then enlisting in the Navy, and maybe some lessons that you learned from there, one or two big lessons that you take away from that time?
Sure. Yeah, so I decided when I was probably my junior year that I didn't see myself going straight to college. And so I wanted to leave the bubble of what I already felt I was living in Kansas, in Wichita, with my family. And so I really wanted to get to know the greater part of the world. And the only way that I knew that I would be able to do that was to join the military. But at the same time, when I was younger, I really loved history. And so thinking about, actually, when very young, I thought, well, in the future, I would love to be a diplomat. But in my mind, very limited understanding of the world was like, well, the only way I'm going to get to different places in the world would be if I joined the military. And I had read histories of people who had been in the military and then also had become diplomats. So that kind of sparked some interest for me in the military. And it was a time that was good, but really challenging too. It was an experience of seeing violence occur, seeing just how precious life is and how quickly it can end. And those were things that really struck me and marked me, and at the same time moved me and pointed me to Christ. And I have to thank my mother and father for that, because I think the faith life that they lived and were patient enough to walk with me as I grew up and see that value, especially in my dad, seeing the great love that he had for Christ and his desire to do the best that he could possibly do. I would see that, and I think that really marked my life in my faith life.
And you said you wanted to see the world. What are some of those places that you got to see when you were in the Navy? Maybe what's your favorite place that you got to maybe spend some time in as a Navyman? Because you've also traveled a lot as a Jesuit as well.
Right. Yeah. I would say, I was in Japan, spent some time in Singapore, in Thailand, in the Middle East, in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and just a whole lot of time in the Persian Gulf, and some time in the Mediterranean too, when things started heating up in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So moved around quite a bit, and it was a beautiful time too, growing up in Kansas, in Wichita, was a place where everybody looked so different than I did. And then all of a sudden, I enter the U.S. military, and I'm seeing people from very different cultures. And for me, that was very eye-opening. So I appreciated those experiences.
And given your time traveling around, and you mentioned that kind of being face to face with the violence that's in the world and seeing the preciousness of life turned you to Christ. At what point did you kind of say to yourself, you know what, I think I want to enter the Society of Jesus? What was that process like, joining the society?
Sure. Again, with these different travels that I did when I was in the military, especially I remember in Thailand, noticing, for me, something that caught my eye was just the poverty. A lot of young people in the streets that were poor and were begging for money. And it was an experience that just really, I think, marked me in saying, wait a minute, why is this happening? And then seeing the policies, I think, of the United States internationally was heartbreaking, I think, for me, to see how much of a way in which they wanted to influence other nations in what they were choosing, and that was heartbreaking for me to see that. So that influenced me a lot to begin to think about the questions of justice. And I think somebody who marked my kind of intellectual curiosity was Howard Zinn. I read many essays from him while I was in the Navy, and reading his essays about the struggles of blacks, men and women in the United States, really did open my eyes to being more attentive to really what's happening. And then all of a sudden the questions of immigration, the questions of what's happening in the United States, and seeing how much immigrants have done and continue to do in the United States, especially in the military, I think really marked me and it began to move me in the direction where I find myself today.
And what year did you end up entering the society?
So I entered the society in 2004.
Okay, 2004. Since that time, a lot of your ministry has been in Spanish-speaking countries or regions, places. What led you to? So you've been in Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, and now Belize, which is not officially Spanish-speaking, but quite a few Spanish speakers out there. Maybe we'll do a Spanish edition of the show. Once Dan and I's Spanish gets better. But what led you to the places that you've been as a Jesuit, especially these Spanish-speaking places, and how has that shaped your vocation as a Jesuit?
Sure. Every Jesuit in the novitiate goes through the spiritual exercises. And I think it was, I know it was there in the exercises where I began to go and be present to my own history and seeing the way in which, God has gifted me in the world with a family that's from another culture, from Colombia, and an interest in wanting to learn a little bit more began to grow in my heart after the exercises. And again, noticing the challenges that a lot of immigrants have in the United States, and who do immigrants have to go to for support. And I noticed the work that the Society of Jesus has been doing with Jesuit refugee services, with the Jesuit migration project, and all of these things to me really began to spark my imagination to kind of begin to imagine myself of working with the Spanish-speaking population. Specifically at that time in the novitiate, in that time I was thinking I would probably stay in the United States, but other opportunities began to be opened up for me. So.
And what was your work like in Nicaragua? Can you describe that?
Yeah, no, Nicaragua I think was one of these moments where, let's see, so born in Colombia, my mother and father are Spanish speaking and English speaking, but I didn't grow up reading, writing, or speaking Spanish until I actually entered the Society of Jesus, and I began to notice just this gift that I had never developed. And so that's where I began to really, again, desire that sense of language being so important, especially when you enter into a culture and being able to be able to use the words and listen to people and how that affects myself. But going to Nicaragua was the first time I would be in a Spanish-speaking country where I was being asked to work, and I had to learn the language. And I was teaching, let's say, 5th grade students, 11th grade, and 12th grade students. So a variety of different groups, and it was all in Spanish. And so that was a great challenge. My first year was really, really challenging, but thank God there was an incredible Spanish teacher that was there, Gemma Ramirez, and then the rector of the school, a Jesuit that was there, Fidel Sancho, who worked with me in helping me become a better Spanish speaker. And so it worked out. And the girls and the boys there at the school were phenomenal. They helped me out. And that was a beautiful moment of saying, wow, okay, God, this is exactly where you want me to be, and I thank you for that. So,
did they ever give you a hard time? Did they ever any bromance?
Of course. I remember words like frase, which is sentence, I would mistaken for fresas, which would be strawberries. And so when I was doing something on the board and I would say fresas, of course the kids would laugh. But it was beautiful because it was a sense of people laughing with me. And so those students were phenomenal, and I still stay in touch with them. Yeah.
And before you were here in Belize, you were in Puerto Rico for a few years, and you arrived right before Hurricane Maria.
Right.
So could you tell us a little bit about that experience, what that was like for you?
Sure. Yeah, I was missioned by the Society of Jesus to work in Colegio San Ignacio, which is a high school, a traditional Jesuit high school there in San Juan, working as the director of campus ministry. And I arrived in July, and 2 huge hurricanes hit us, right? So Hurricane Irma, and then practically, I think it was 2 weeks afterwards, Hurricane Maria hit us. And it really, it destroyed the island, right? And so that experience, I think, was eye-opening in a sense of working with a group of students who, economically, they have what they need. And even after this hurricane, we were without electricity for almost 4 months. And a lot of these families had generators and were able to kind of deal with those issues. But this is a very small group of families. And all of a sudden, the island is devastated by a hurricane, and we recognize that there's a great need. So the president of the school and myself, Flavio Bravo, and myself began to kind of look at the island and see where we could be. And we began to contact people and make some decisions to start sending out our students to different parts of the island to bring water filters, to bring food, to bring whatever was needed. And all of a sudden, we waited about 2 weeks after the hurricane just to make sure we contacted all the parents, all the families, all the teachers. And then we invited everyone to come to the school. And then we literally said, okay, this is our job as a Jesuit school. Our work is to serve our brothers and sisters. And so we're being called right now to serve. And so we went out and we did this. And this was taking 650 boys out to different parts of the island. And it was a beautiful experience to see how these boys were looking at their world through new eyes. And it was a world that before had been so trimmed and well kept to a world that has been completely destroyed and is very raw. And I think that was an eye-opening experience for those boys, for those families, but also for myself too. It was a very tough experience, but it was an experience of seeing the presence of God with the generosity that was being placed before us.
And it's such a good example, a difficult experience, but a good example of our mission that we've articulated in recent years. The Jesuit mission is the service of faith and the promotion of justice with which that faith requires, right? That our faith calls us to service, right? And when we're at the Mass, we're missioned to go forth and proclaim the gospel. And that's not only by words, but by the testimony of our life, right? And our life is a life of service, a life devoted to others. So that's a great example for your students, just to experience that in the most difficult moments, that their faith, right, actually made them serve or drove them to serve their community in a way that was so necessary in that time.
And the beautiful thing too is when you're working with young people are full of questions. And to walk with young people who begin to ask serious questions that deal with social issues is, I think, so important. And to be given the opportunity to accompany a young person as they do that is incredible, because they have valid questions. And when they begin to see the disparity between some people having so much to so many people having nothing, and walking with them as they ask those questions, I think was just a wonderful experience to be a part of.
And it sounds like those questions help them chip away at that trim view of the world, which is what good questions do. I mean, they take our assumptions about what we think about the world and force us to kind of reckon with the cracks and to really sit with them.
Right. And it reminds me of Brian's, our Father Brian, our conversation with him, which you can find online if you'd like to look for that. But he talked about the importance of questions in his vocation, early on in his vocation. And I think it's so important never to kill questions, right? To encourage questions, because we want young people to be curious and to be asking questions, because the alternative is just for them to not have any interest at all. So I want to encourage our viewers, especially for those parents and grandparents out there, never kill questions, right? Encourage those questions, because within searching for the answers, right, I think Christ is present in all that. So encourage questions.
And I would say too, just to kind of add on, it's okay not to have the answers.
Yes.
It's it's fine to not have the answers. Because again, that's an invitation for the adult to say, okay, well, I need to find out what's happening myself. And what a way to open a door to a new way of looking at the world.
And one that is communal.
Right.
Searching
Absolutely.
for the answer. We look for it together.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Shifting gears a little bit, we talked earlier about your running. When did that become a hobby of yours, and what role has that played in your life?
Yeah. Oh, so I love sports. As a little kid, to being in high school and even in the military, and even now, I love to be active, being outside and running. So I love football, soccer. I think it's a great sport. I think Ian also enjoys the sport a little.
They've heard about all that.
Good. But it was there I realized that, wow, I can run and I'm not getting tired. And so in our practices, I remember a coach that we had that he literally would say, you're going to run about 3 miles a game. So I want you to run 5 miles before every practice. And so conditioning was really important, right? But, nowadays, with the work that I do as a Jesuit, even in the novitiate, finding a way of taking care of my body, because it's so important to take care of your body, so that if your body is rested, if your body is it's being the proper nutrition, it's going to help you in the way that you do think and the way in which you present yourself and present what's happening. So you find that balance, and I think sports or exercise is really important.
I think that's something that I think maybe is hidden in religious life and just life as an adult in general, that like taking care of our bodies helps us be at the service of other people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it can become something that I'll speak for myself. Like, well, I have this meeting, so therefore I'm not gonna do that. Mm-hmm. But that actually, and the scriptures talk about the body being the temple of the Holy Spirit. And that, our bodies are created for us to be in the world.
Right.
So I think that's really important just to highlight that thing. Thanks for doing that.
Sure.
Yeah, as incarnational people, right? That Christ became a person, right? He took on flesh, and then in that resurrection, that He's drawing all of creation up into that. So we have to take care of our bodies, and it's also important to take care of creation itself, right? Because all of this is being drawn up into the resurrection, that newness of life that Christ gives us. So I think we get to experience that a little bit when we have the joy and freedom of feeling ourselves in our bodies, right? Of when we exercise, or when we play football, or when we do whatever. That there's a joy in that, and there's a real goodness there that is bringing out an aspect of our created nature that is God-given, and God wants us to use it. Yeah. So we're coming up on one of our last questions, the final question before the final question. And this is kind of a deep one, so I hope you're ready.
Oh, Lord.
But you have all these different ministries, these different experiences in ministry. Who is the face of Christ for you?
The poor. The greatest gift, I think, in my own life as a Jesuit is the gift of being placed in areas where the poor, humble Christ is found. And it's a place where all of a sudden, great, I've got an incredible education, but I am placed in an area where that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that Christ is present in a person, and Christ wants to teach each one of us in that encounter something about Him, something about God. And if you're able to be attentive and sensitive to that, it changes your worldview. You see with new eyes. So.
Matthew 25, right?
Right.
And in Matthew 25, Jesus identifies Himself with the poor, the naked, the outcast, the stranger, the imprisoned, the sick. And so we need to pay attention to that.
Right, for sure. Sure, for sure.
Well, as Ian alluded to, we always have a final question. And this is a question that all of us answer. And we actually have a few options here.
Oh boy.
One of them is about aviation and favorite aircraft, which is a great question, but I don't think I know anything about that. I don't know about Ian. Maybe he knows some.
I don't think I know anything, but Father Andres, you used to, in the Navy, you worked with jets, right? Like jet craft.
Right.
And then your dad was also an avid aviator and working on aircraft. So that was one of the reasons we wanted to ask that question, but I don't think we don't have an answer ourselves.
Yeah, I would just say like a 737, not really knowing what that means.
One that flies and and lands and everything works.
Doesn't break apart.
Yeah.
While you're in it. So I think I'm torn because there's some good ones. There's some good ones here.
I think I know which one I'd like to ask.
Go for it.
But I think it's because I know, Andres, you're a reader. Andres he's a special kind of reader because he reads on his iPhone, on his iPhone. And I can read a text message on my iPhone, but a whole book, but he's like, it's so handy, I can go anywhere and pull out my book, which is not wrong. But that question, the question therefore is, what book have you, a good book that you've read recently, or maybe not so recently, why'd you like it? Why was it good?
Sure. I'm reading, actually just finished yesterday, a book called Atlas of the Heart
On your iPhone.
On my iPhone, yes. By Brene Brown, that's right. By Brene Brown. And it's a wonderful read, which Brene Brown is a researcher who has done a lot of work with vulnerability and shame. And in the book, she talks a lot about what emotions are and how important emotions are, and having a language, the words to talk about emotions. And so as I began to kind of see which next book I was going to read, that struck me because, again, for us in the Society of Jesus, in Ignatian spirituality, emotions are important to keep an eye out on, right? And so looking at the way that this author spoke about a variety of different emotions, I think has been helpful for me to understand, and a wonderful resource to what maybe in the future as I do retreats to present to folks.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's got me interested, for sure.
It's good.
I think I put it on my wish list on the old Amazon, so I've had my eye on it as well.
Good.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I was just going to say the great thing about Brene Brown is there's a lot of online stuff that you can access with her too. If
That's
you're
right.
interested.
TED Talks and whatnot.
TED Talks.
Right.
I think Netflix special even.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's widely, her thought and writing is widely available. For me, it's the book I'm reading right now. It's called The Great Conversation. And it's by a professor that I had when I was in college, Belden Lane. And it's a book about developing a relationship with creation. Hence the name Great Conversation. And at the heart of the book is a friendship that Belden has developed with a tree that's a walk away from his home in St. Louis, Missouri, and how he's learned a lot about nature, how he's learned a lot about himself by spending time with this old tree that he calls grandfather that I think has been set on fire. He's climbed it several times.
Did he set it on fire?
He did not set it on fire.
While he was climbing it, he set it on fire.
Right, exactly. And it's bizarre, right? Like somebody having a friendship or a relationship with a tree. But I think it serves as a really, maybe it sounds strange because we're so removed from creation. And so it's been stoking a lot of thinking in me about what my relationship is to creation, especially in a place that's so beautiful like Belize, and that I haven't had a chance to explore nearly as much as I want to. So I think that's been stirring my imagination a lot.
Awesome.
One book that I recently finished, I reread it. It's called The Road. It's by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh yeah.
And it's a rather dark book, but speaking of creation and how lush Belize is, because in The Road it's a post-apocalyptic book that I may have talked about on a previous episode. I'm not sure, but it's a post-apocalyptic book where something's happened that has kind of caused the end, and but there's a father and a son, right? And they're making their way west. And they have this term that they're carrying the fire, meaning there's a lot of people are resorting to cannibalism. People are resorting to just violence as the primary means of getting what they want. And this father and son are carrying the fire. They're refusing violence. Like they protect themselves, but they're scavenging for food. They're not they won't resort to cannibalism. They won't resort to losing their humanity, right? So they're carrying the fire, and it reminds me of John's gospel, right? That they're carrying this light, right? Fire is light, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And so there's a lot of Christological and theological motifs in the book, and it's just it's a book of immense odds, and but that somehow even in the darkness that God's light is shining, and it's often through people, right? It's often through people and the love that we share with the ones we're close to. So it's a good book. It's not a very long book, but it's an emotional one. So just you better make sure you get plenty of vitamin D out in that Belize sunshine before you read it, because it is a sad book as well. So, but yeah, so that's the one.
Great. Yeah. Well, you you've got 3 Jesuits and you get 3 widely different book recommendations, but I think that's the beauty of who we are, is that we've got all kinds of interests. So if you're a person, a young man in particular, who finds that interesting, definitely check us out online or come visit us at St. Martin's or SJC or a number of places.
Or beajesuit.org. That's all, no hyphens, no spaces, beajesuit.org if you wanted to, if you're interested in a Jesuit vocation, definitely.
So thank you, Father Andres, for being with us.
Of course.
We really enjoyed hearing a little bit about your story, and I'm sure our audience really also enjoyed hearing more about you, especially your parishioners, as they're getting to know you at St. Martin's. And of course, as always, we encourage you, if you have any ideas for us about future episodes or comments on this episode, please leave us some comments on YouTube or Facebook if you're watching it through that way. If you're on the radio listening or on TV watching, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll be with you next time. See you then.
Bye.